Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I could never have imagined that such a common invitation from Liam to grab a beer would end up completely changing my life. We had known each other since we were kids. Since skinned knees and trading baseball cards. Our memories weren't just shared. They were woven together. Decades of them. The childish fights over nothing. The teenage adventures that felt like everything. The quiet advice exchanged in the hushed tones of adulthood. Liam wasn't just a friend. He was my brother. He was the best man at my wedding when I married Lisa. I was his. He was the fixed point in my life, a constant presence that always meant safety, loyalty. So when his text came through, "Hey man, need to talk. Beer tonight?" I didn't suspect a thing. Just another Thursday. Just another chance to escape the week and fall into the easy comfort of a friendship that asked for nothing. But when I arrived at the bar, something was wrong. Instantly. It was in the air, thick and heavy. He was already there, sitting at our usual corner table. But he wasn't the Liam I knew. He kept fiddling with his phone, his thumb swiping aimlessly across a dark screen. He wouldn't look at me, not really. His eyes darted around the room, settling on anything but my face, while his other hand absent-mindedly toyed with the cap from his beer bottle. Click. Click. The sound drilled into the silence between us. I tried to break the tension. I slid into the booth opposite him. "Tough week?" I asked, forcing a smile. I talked. I filled the space he was creating. I talked about a stupid project at work, about the new client from hell. I mentioned the weekend trip Lisa and I were planning, a little getaway to the coast. I even laughed at some dumb joke I'd heard, hoping to see that familiar spark in his eyes. Nothing. He just responded with monosyllables. "Yeah. Who?" "Right." His usual enthusiasm was gone, replaced by this hollow shell. I knew something was off, but I decided to wait. Liam was my brother. You give a brother space to speak when he's ready. He took a few deep breaths, his chest rising and falling in a way that was too deliberate. He took a quick, nervous sip of his beer. Then another. Then he pushed the bottle away and the silence that followed felt endless. It stretched and pulled until it was thin enough to snap. Finally, he raised his eyes, and what I saw in them made my stomach drop. It was a heavy expression, the look of someone carrying a guilt they wanted to get rid of, but feared the consequences of letting it go. Without beating around the bush, without any preamble, he blurted it out. "Mark, I need to tell you something." His voice was strained, low. I shifted in my seat, my heart starting a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I still couldn't imagine the gravity of what was coming. Maybe it was about his job. Maybe his mom's health. He closed his eyes for a second, a flicker of pain crossing his face. He ran a hand over his tired features and continued, the words tumbling out as if he couldn't hold them back any longer. "I saw Lisa." He paused, and I waited. "Okay, where?" He opened his eyes again, and they were filled with a deep, profound sorrow. "For me. I saw her with another guy, Mark." The sentence didn't register at first. It was just a string of words, sounds in a noisy bar. Then they hit me, like an unexpected punch to the gut, stealing all the air from my lungs. I froze, trying to process it, trying to understand if I had heard him correctly. He must have seen the confusion, the disbelief on my face, because he hurried on, his voice a low, urgent murmur. "I have to tell you what I saw." And just like that, the floor fell away from my world. The drive home was a blur. Liam's words echoed in my head, playing on a loop. A passionate, engaging, intimate kiss. It wasn't a quick peck. No room for innocent interpretations. I pulled into the driveway, the house lit up and welcoming. Our home. The home Lisa and I had built together. Every brick felt like a lie. I sat in the car for a long time, the engine off, just staring. The porch light cast a warm, golden glow, the kind you see in movies about happy families. My hand was shaking as I put the key in the door. She was in the kitchen, humming to some song on the radio, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. She turned when she heard me, and her face lit up with that smile. That same smile that had captured my heart a decade ago. "Hey, you're back," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. She came over and kissed me, a light peck on the lips. It felt like fire and ice. Her touch burned, and my heart felt frozen solid. "Long day?" she asked, her eyes full of concern, or what I had always believed was concern. "Yeah," I mumbled, "just tired." I tried to act normal. I had to. I couldn't let her see. Not yet. not until I knew. But everything was different now. Tainted. The way she talked about her day at the art gallery where she worked. Was it all a script? The way she touched my arm when she laughed at something I said. Was it just a performance? Every goodbye kiss, every I love you whispered before sleep, every text message during the day, everything now seemed loaded with another intention. A shadow of doubt fell over every single memory. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft, even rhythm of her breathing beside me. This woman, my wife, my partner, the person I trusted more than anyone on earth. Was she a stranger? Was this whole life we had built together a facade? I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. A terrible mistake. Maybe Liam had seen someone who just looked like her. Maybe he'd had too much to drink. I clung to these possibilities like a drowning man clutching at straws. But the certainty in his voice, the pain in his eyes as he told me, he wasn't mistaken. He saw what he saw. The anguish started to take over. It was a poison, seeping into every corner of my life. At work, I couldn't focus. I'd stare at my computer screen, but all I could see was the scene Liam described. Lisa, in a bar I didn't know, with a man I'd never seen. I knew I couldn't live like this. The not knowing was worse than the truth, whatever it might be. I couldn't confront her based on a second-hand story. It would just be my word against hers. She would deny it, call Liam a liar, and it would tear my friendship and my marriage apart based on suspicion alone. No, I needed proof, concrete, irrefutable. I needed to see it with my own eyes. And so, in the cold, quiet darkness of my study, a plan began to form. A terrible, ugly plan that made me feel sick to my stomach. I was going to have to betray her trust, to find out if she had already destroyed mine. The next day, I went online, and with trembling hands, I bought a small GPS tracking device. The kind you could hide easily. It arrived 2 days later in a discreet brown box. Holding it in my palm, this tiny piece of plastic and circuitry, it felt heavier than anything I had ever held in my life. It was the weight of what I was about to do, the weight of what I might find. The conference in Chicago got moved up. I told her over dinner. I have to fly out Monday morning. I'll be gone for a few days. The lie slid out of my mouth more easily than I expected. That was the scariest part. Lisa looked up from her plate, her brow furrowed with mild disappointment. Oh, really? That's a shame. I was looking forward to our movie night on Tuesday. I know, honey. I'm sorry. It's last minute, but it's important. She believed me. Of course she did. Why wouldn't she? I had never given her a reason to doubt me. She wished me good luck, hugged me, told me to be safe, as she always did. Little did she know that while I was supposedly attending meetings, I would actually be starting the most painful investigation of my life. The night before my trip, my heart hammered in my chest. Lisa went to take her evening shower, the sound of the water running a steady backdrop to my own betrayal. This was my chance. I grabbed the small, magnetic GPS device. My hands were slick with sweat. I walked to the garage, the concrete floor cold beneath my feet. Her car was there, parked as always. A symbol of her freedom, her independence. And now, possibly, her deception. I opened the passenger door, the interior dome light casting long shadows. I crouched down, my breath catching in my throat, and in a matter of seconds, I attached the tracker under the seat, well hidden, where she would never notice. Before leaving the garage, I took a deep, shuddering breath. The guilt was overwhelming. This was a line I never thought I would cross. I was spying on my own wife, but at the same time, I knew I had to. I needed to be certain of the truth. The next morning, I left the house with a suitcase I had packed with a few random clothes, just to reinforce the alibi. I gave Lisa a light kiss on the cheek. It felt like kissing a ghost. Have a good week, I said, my voice hollow. She smiled, carefree and beautiful, as if she had nothing in the world to hide. You too. Have a safe trip. As soon as I turned the corner, out of sight of our house, I pulled the car over and picked up my phone. I opened the tracking app. A small blue dot showed the exact location of her car. Parked in our garage. The plan was working. I didn't go to the airport. I drove to a simple, nondescript hotel in the city. Not too far from home, but not too close. A place where I could be anonymous. A place where I could watch. The first few days were torture. I spent hours staring at the app on my phone, the blue dot a constant, obsessive focus. I tried to work remotely, but it was useless. Her movements were completely normal. The dot traveled from our house to the art gallery. It stopped at the grocery store. It went to the gym. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect. For a few moments, a dangerous hope began to bloom in my chest. Maybe Liam was wrong. Maybe it was all a terrible mistake. I started to fantasize about the end of the week. I would retrieve the GPS, delete the app, and move on with my life as if none of this had ever happened. I would apologize to Liam for ever doubting him, but secretly thank God that he had been mistaken. Then came Thursday night. The pattern changed. Around 8 p.m., the tracker indicated that her car had left the house. I watched, my heart pounding, as the blue dot moved in real time. It crawled through streets I knew well, then turned onto a boulevard I rarely used. It moved steadily, with purpose, until it stopped. It stopped in front of a small, dimly lit bar with a neon sign that just said the Crimson Door. The same place, the exact same place Liam had described in excruciating detail. My stomach churned, a cold knot of dread tightening inside me. The hope I had foolishly allowed myself to feel, it shattered into a million pieces. I grabbed my keys. I had to go there. I had to see. The drive felt like an eternity. Every red light was a personal insult, delaying the inevitable. I parked across the street, at a safe distance, but with a clear view of the bar's entrance and the large window next to it. My hands were sweating, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. And then I saw her. She was sitting at a small table by the window, alone. She was wearing a dark green dress, one I knew she loved, one she always wore when she wanted to feel attractive, groomed, confident. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She was scrolling through her phone, apparently relaxed, like someone who knew the place, who felt comfortable there. I just watched. My heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. Minutes passed, each one a lifetime. Then, a man appeared. He walked casually toward the entrance, his silhouette framed for a moment by the neon glow of the sign. I saw him cross the door and through the window. I watched as he headed directly to the table where Lisa was sitting. He leaned down. They greeted each other with a kiss on the lips. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness. It was easy, familiar. The kiss of two lovers who had repeated that scene many times before. I felt a pressure in my chest, so intense it was hard to breathe. It was real, all of it. I watched them talk. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the story. The way he leaned in close, the way she laughed, tilting her head back, the way his hand rested on hers on the table. Subtle, intimate caresses. They looked happy, content, like they belonged together. And I was the outsider, sitting in the dark, watching my life being stolen from me. About half an hour later, they stood up. They left the bar together. Lisa walked beside him, her arm linked through his, like someone strolling with an intimate partner. Someone she knew well. I followed with my eyes as they reached her car. My car. Our car. She unlocked it. She opened the back door. The man got in first. Then she followed him, closing the door immediately after. I remained where I was. My body was tense, my eyes fixed on that car. The windows were tinted, but I could see the movements inside. The shift of shadows, the way their bodies leaned toward each other. The scene was so clear in my mind, so vulgar, so devastating. For a moment, I thought about just leaving. Driving away. Pretending I hadn't seen anything. I could just disappear and never come back. But I couldn't. I was driven by a storm of pain and anger that I could no longer control. I got out of my car. The night air was cold, but I didn't feel it. I crossed the parking lot with determined, heavy steps. Each footfall was a hammer blow, sealing the end of my marriage. I stopped right next to the driver's side window of Lisa's car, and I knocked, forcefully, my knuckles rapped against the glass, the sound sharp and violent in the quiet lot. The movement inside stopped, a moment of shocked stillness. Then the door flew open. Lisa stumbled out, her face pale, her eyes wide with the terror of someone caught red-handed. She didn't need to say anything. Her expression said it all. Betrayal, guilt, shame. It was all there. It was all true. I spared no words, no shouts. My voice was low, dangerously quiet, shaking with a fury that was colder and sharper than any scream. Right there, in the middle of that dimly lit parking lot, I poured out all my indignation, my hurt, my rage. How could you? I started, my voice barely a whisper. People around us started to notice. A couple walking to their car slowed down. Someone smoking by the entrance of a nearby building looked over. I didn't care. Let them watch. Let the whole world see the wreckage of my life. Mark, she stammered, her hand coming up to her mouth. I can explain. Explain? The word was a bitter taste in my mouth. Explain what, Lisa? Explain the man in the back seat of our car? Explain the kisses? The lies? I didn't want to hear explanations or excuses. I didn't give her the chance. The lover, Julian, remained motionless inside the car, a coward hiding in the shadows, avoiding any eye contact. I looked at her one last time, this woman who had been the center of my universe, and I saw a stranger. I turned my back on her. I left her standing there, not knowing what to do, confused, ashamed. I walked back to my car, got in, and drove away. There was no turning back. As soon as I left the parking lot, I drove straight to the hotel. I didn't even think. I went up to the room, threw everything into my suitcase without looking, without folding, just grabbing handfuls of clothes, the charger, the laptop, like someone fleeing a disaster zone, because that's what it was. Within minutes, I was back in my car, and I drove home, to my home. I entered the silent house, left the suitcase on the living room floor, and stood there, motionless, my eyes fixed on the front door, waiting. It didn't take long. I heard the sound of her car pulling into the garage, the engine cutting out, the clink of her keys. My heart beat hard, but it wasn't hesitation anymore. It was conviction. Lisa slowly opened the door, and as soon as she saw me standing there, in the middle of the living room, her eyes widened in shock and fear. Immediately, she started crying, a theatrical, gut-wrenching sob, her hand covering her mouth as if trying to hold back the tears. Mark, she choked out. She took a few hesitant steps toward me, repeating my name between sobs, like someone pleading for a chance to explain. But I remained motionless. My gaze was hard, unforgiving. I felt no pity, only a vast, empty coldness. She approached a little more, extending her hand as if wanting to touch me, to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. I stepped back. I pointed to the door, and with a firm, cutting voice that I didn't recognize as my own, I snapped, "Get out." The words hung in the air between us. "Mark, please, just let me get out of my house. Now." She started to mumble something, trying to justify herself, but I raised my voice, the cold control finally breaking. "I saw everything, Lisa. In the car, in the bar, you cheated on me. You destroyed everything." She covered her face with her hands, crying uncontrollably, her body trembling. She tried to speak, but I didn't allow it. I strode to the front door and pulled it open forcefully. "Get out of here." The shouting was so intense that I saw curtains twitch in the house across the street. Neighbors started coming out onto their porches, watching the uncomfortable, raw, unfiltered scene of our marriage imploding. Lisa, without the strength to resist, grabbed the purse she was still holding and slowly walked to the door, her face drenched in tears. She looked at me one last time, her eyes begging for something I could no longer give. I remained unmoved, my arms crossed, watching as she left and got into her car. The engine started. The taillights disappeared down the street, and she was gone. I slammed the door shut. The sound echoed through the empty house, and then, there was only silence. The next day was a blur of methodical destruction. There was no more room for emotion, only for action. My first call was to a lawyer, the best divorce attorney I could find. My second call was to the bank. I moved my money, removed my name from our joint accounts. I severed the financial ties that bound us. My lawyer suggested a restraining order. It felt extreme, but in the cold light of day, I agreed. I wanted a legal barrier between her life and mine. The betrayal hadn't just destroyed our marriage. It had annihilated the trust, the respect, the very foundation that had sustained our relationship for years. For me, that chapter was definitively closed. The pain still burned, a dull, constant ache in my chest, but it now gave way to an irreversible impulse to move forward. Far away from all of it, a few days later, Milaver called. "Mark," he said, his voice professional and calm, "Lisa's lawyer has contested the restraining order. They're arguing she poses no threat, that she just wants a chance to talk, to clarify things." I was silent for a few seconds, staring out the window of my now empty home. Clarify what? The truth was already crystal clear. But then, surprisingly, even to myself, I told him I would agree to revoke it. It wasn't because I wanted reconciliation. It wasn't because I wanted to hear her out. It was because I no longer saw the point. There was nothing left to protect. The trust, the respect, the love, all of that had already been destroyed. It was like putting a lock on a house that had already burned to the ground. The ashes couldn't be stolen. The next day, as I was organizing some of the divorce documents, my phone rang. Her name flashed on the screen. Lisa. For a moment, I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen, unsure whether to answer or simply ignore it. But I answered. I wanted to hear what she had to say. Not for her, but for me. I wanted to close this chapter definitively, without room for doubts or loose ends. I put the phone to my ear and said nothing. On the other end of the line, her voice came out weak, shaky, as if she had spent all her strength just pressing the call button. Mark? I stayed silent, waiting. She took a deep, shuddering breath and then the words came rushing out, all at once, like she was afraid of losing her courage halfway through. I wanted to apologize. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt lonely, confused. There's no excuse, I know, but I got lost. And when I realized, it was already too late. She paused, as if waiting for some reaction, some sign that I was truly listening. Then she continued, her voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to destroy what we built. I just wanted to feel alive again. And now I've lost everything. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, and I maintained a calm tone, even though my heart felt heavy as stone. I know, Lisa, she pressed on, desperate. I want you to know that I regret it. If I could go back, I would do everything differently. I loved you. I still do. The last sentence was almost a whisper, filled with a pain and remorse that came far too late. But her words changed nothing. What was broken between us couldn't be fixed with apologies. I replied, my voice firm but not aggressive. I also loved you, Lisa. Very much. I let that hang in the air for a moment. But love isn't enough when there's no respect. You knew that. She was silent on the other end, just the sound of her heavy breathing, holding back tears. I knew this was the end, the final word. I hope you're okay, I said, and I meant it. Truly. But from now on, my life doesn't include you anymore. And I hung up. I didn't wait for a response. I stood there, the phone still in my hand, staring into the void of my empty living room. I felt a strange relief mixed with a deep, profound sadness. It was the end, not a dramatic, fiery end, not an end full of fights, but a silent, mature, necessary end. At that moment, I realized I no longer needed answers or justifications. What I needed now was peace. And finally, I felt like I might be able to find it. A few weeks later, with the divorce proceedings underway and no further contact with Lisa, I accepted Liam's invitation to grab a beer, as they had so many times throughout our lives. It was the first time we had seen each other since the day everything collapsed. We went back to the same bar, the same corner booth where he had handed me the terrible truth. The symmetry felt right. A way to close the circle. The atmosphere between us was different, quieter, but charged with a deep camaraderie, forged over years of friendship, and now, a shared pain. My pain, which he had carried for me. After a few sips, Liam looked at me, took a deep breath, and said, I waited for the right moment to tell you this, but I think you deserve to know. I raised my eyes, attentive but serene. I felt prepared. After what I had been through, I felt like I could handle anything. Liam continued, his voice low. The guy you saw with Lisa. Her lover, Julian. I nodded slowly, just listening. He's her ex-boyfriend, Mark. From before she met you. I remained silent, processing this. It didn't surprise me as much as I thought it would. It almost made a sick kind of sense. And there's more, Liam added, his expression grim. He's married, has been for years. He has 2 young kids. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. And Lisa, she had no idea about any of this. I let out a long, deep sigh. I leaned back in the booth and rubbed my face, absorbing that final revelation. It felt like another punch, but curiously, it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. The anger was gone. The pain was fading. What was left was a strange, sad clarity. Liam watched me with a concerned look. She destroyed your marriage for someone who was never going to be with her. For someone who was lying to her the whole time. And then I did something I didn't expect. I managed a smile, a sad smile. Yes. Without irony, without anger. Just the expression of someone who finally understood the full, tragic magnitude of it all. Lisa hadn't left me for a better life. She had left me for another lie. She had blown up our world in pursuit of an illusion, a fantasy built by a man who was just as deceitful as she was. I raised my glass. I silently toasted Liam, my brother, the one who had stood by me through the fire. And before I took a drink, I said, the words coming to me with absolute certainty, some people only realize the damage they've caused when it's too late to turn back. And in that silent toast, in that quiet, unassuming bar, I realized I no longer carried the pain. I only carried the lesson, the certainty that I deserved something better, something real, and more importantly than anything, I was ready to move on.